Ken Whiting with Paddle TV, and in this video, we're going to talk about 5 big mistakes that beginner and novice kayakers often make. And we're going to try to, I'm going to try to save you the grief from making those mistakes yourself, because by making those mistakes, there's a good chance you'll end up wet, or you'll end up looking like a doofus, or both. The first big mistake that new paddlers make is using the paddle upside down. And when I see people use a paddle upside down, it's like seeing someone wearing their shoes on the wrong feet. It's just, you look like a doofus, okay? That's the simple truth. You look like a doofus when you're doing it, but it's more than just looking off. The shape of kayak paddles are such that when you're taking a stroke, it's designed so that you've got the center line of the blade. When you're taking a stroke, basically an equal amount of force is being placed on either side, the top and bottom of the blade. And that helps prevent fluttering through the water. It provides a nice steady pull. So when you use a paddle, there we go, upside down, you're not going to have that even distribution of paddle power on the top and bottom parts of the paddle, and you're going to end up with a little bit of flutter. And that, it may not even be that noticeable, but it will be over a period of time. But more importantly, it just looks wrong. The way you can tell if your paddle is upside down is very simple. The logos on all paddles, if you can't read it, if it looks upside down on both sides, like when I'm reading that, Aquabound, it's upside down. My paddle is upside down. So flip it over, bam, you know that the paddle is no longer upside down. Now the other one with paddles is drip rings. Drip rings, what they're designed for is a drip ring is designed to stop the water that after you take a stroke that runs down your paddle from running all the way to your hands and then down your arms and your side and giving the old body shiver. The water comes to the drip ring and then drops right off from there. That's an important one to know. You don't want the drip rings right in against your hands. Don't use it as a gauge for your hands or a landmark for your hands, because the water's just gonna run right down to your hands, down your side, give you the shivers, and you look like a doofus.
Just loving that word.
All right, the next big mistake you don't want to make is not being prepared for a flip. Now, even if you think there's a very low chance of actually flipping on the type of paddling trip that you're going, or based on your experience, you still need to be prepared for a flip. And that applies in a variety of ways. First of all, life jacket. A life jacket doesn't do any good in the back of the boat or just sitting over your shoulders like wide open. Wear the life jacket and wear it properly so that if you do go for a swim, it's ready to do its job. Now, that's where paddling specific PFDs come in. They are comfortable to wear all day long, and they're comfortable to paddle in too. So spending a bit of extra money on a good paddling specific life jacket is a good idea if you're going to be doing a significant amount of paddling. Now, the clothing you wear as well, really important that you're dressed for immersion. And where it really applies the most is when the air temperature is warm, but the water is cold or cool. So, you might be totally comfortable in just a shirt, a t-shirt, but if you ended up in the water, you could be dealing with hypothermia very quickly if the water's that cold. So how do you dress for that? Well, even if you don't think you're going to go into the water, you have to be prepared for that eventuality. And it doesn't mean you need to wear a dry suit and sweat buckets all the time. I mean, if you followed the rules to a T, you would. You need to prepare for immersion. But practically, you don't need to be ultra comfortable if you end up in this cool water. You just need to be able to survive it. And even if that means being uncomfortable for the rest of the day. So I would recommend, there's all sorts of great products out there like wetsuits. A wetsuit is a great thing to have on when you're dealing with cool water. A thin wetsuit will provide some protection. NRS has something that I use all the time called HydroSkin. The colder the water, the more protection you're going to need. And so the more differential between the water temperature and the air temperature, the more difficult it is to dress appropriately, and really, the hotter you're going to be paddling. So how else do you prepare for a swim? Well, you have to have things like, well, wallet, keys, anything that can't get wet, put it in a dry bag, and then clip the dry bag into your boat so that if you do flip, it's not just going to drift away. Your cell phone, don't just put it in your pocket, put it in a waterproof cell phone case. That'll save you some real grief. Anything that can't get wet should be in a dry bag and clipped into your boat. So now the next mistake that new kayakers, well, this is a mistake that new kayakers and experienced kayakers make, and sometimes I do it and I shouldn't, and I know, and I pay the price very regularly. Don't wear flip-flops and kayak. It's just a bad idea. You are going into an environment with, you could very easily end up walking, dealing with rugged terrain, and carrying a load. You could have to carry your boat across rocky or uneven or just nasty, slippery terrain. Flip-flops are totally useless in that kind of a situation, and you are going to end up with cut up, banged up, brutalized feet. Trust me, I've done it many times, and I don't seem to be learning the lesson. But really, I avoid at all costs. The only time I ever wear flip-flops is when I forget my other footwear, but even then, I know it's a really bad idea. You need to really think about a water shoe. And there's a variety of water shoes. Like this water shoe is an actual shoe. It's got a normal shoe sole. It's got drainage, so any water that gets in this thing is just draining right out. This is great for, stand-up paddling, canoeing, for wreck kayaking, for, anything where you don't have to squeeze into a tight boat. These sometimes don't fit into whitewater kayaks and sea kayaks, depending on how big your feet are. And that's where booties come in. Booties are a lot more flexible. They squeeze into gaps and they let your feet conform. And so they're also warmer than a wet shoe. They're neoprene, just like a wetsuit. And so you can get different thicknesses of booties, a wide variety of these things to choose from. I just tested a $10 pair that I got at Walmart to see what's a $10 pair like. And you know what? They're not as good as these, but if that's all you can afford, then get it. Instead of wearing flip-flops, because you are going to save yourself some real pain, even with that small investment. Now, the next big mistake that paddlers make relates to safety. And before I talk about it, let me first talk about safety. And if you've watched my videos, you've heard me talk about it before. ACA the American Canoe Association, has an online safety paddling course. And right now it's free to take. You do it at your own leisure. It's such a small investment of time that can make a huge difference in your life. So if you haven't taken it, go ahead and take it. Do yourself a favor. I'll leave a link in the description box down below. Now, the big mistake people make, aside from not taking the ACA online paddling safety course, is not practicing getting back into their kayak from the water before they go paddling. And I'm not talking about every time. I'm talking about knowing whether or not you can get back into your kayak from the water before you go on paddling trips. You don't want to be figuring that out when you're in the middle of a lake and cold and a little scared and trying to get back in your kayak and realize, I actually can't get back in my kayak. If you can't get back in your kayak, it's not a big deal. You can take courses and learn how, and it is can be quite challenging. It does take some strength. And so you just need to know whether or not you can, because that will impact the decisions you make along the way. If you're paddling and you in a place and you can't get back in your kayak, well, that really means, unless you can rely on your paddling partners to get you back in your boat, which is hard as well, then you have to stay close enough to shore to swim to shore. And then your buddies can tow your boat to shore, and then you put the pieces back together there and then start paddling again. That's your best option. If you do know and you've practiced getting back into your kayak from the water, then you have the comfort, the confidence to go further out. You can paddle further out than you can comfortably swim back to shore. Now, the next big mistake that paddlers make at the launch is bridging their kayak. And what that means is that if you have a slope going into the water, you know, a decent sized slope, and anything but a really shallow slope, if I put the boat like this and I try to launch like this, well, that end of the boat is buoyant right now. It's being held up by the water. This end of the boat is what's touching ground. The center of the boat, where you get all your stability, is basically hanging. And so if you try to get in right now, this boat is going to be super tippy, and you're creating a bridge, and inevitably you'll get in, lose your balance, wham, go into the water right at the launch. You'll look like a doofus, but the good news is you're going to give everybody else at the launch a great start to the day. What you want to do instead, though, after you watch someone else do that, is pretty much always pull the kayak right in to the water, bring it up alongside the shore, parallel to the shoreline, and hop in that way. Save yourself some grief. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and more importantly, I hope this video helps prevent you from looking like a doofus out there and getting wet. If you have enjoyed it, then give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to Paddle TV if you haven't already, and check out the inforadventure.com website, which has all my gear reviews, tips, paddling adventures, plus a ton of other trail-based paddling tips, gear reviews, adventures, lots of great stuff just to help people get outdoors. We'll see you again soon.